There is a moment we tend to hit in our corporate careers when the work becomes more complex, the stakes become higher, and the expectations around you rise faster than your internal sense of readiness. On paper, you're exactly where you're meant to be, but inside, something feels slightly off. It's subtle, it's private, it doesn't really announce itself, it shows up in the pause between you speak, in the relief after a meeting goes well, when you hear a quiet question that follows your success. Was that really me, or was it just luck? And while most people internalize this as personal fear of failure, research and psychology tells a very different story. What you're experiencing is not incompetence. It's often a side effect of operating in high performance cultures, and ironically, in some cases, a marker of exactly the qualities that make you so effective. So if you ever walked into a boardroom and suddenly forgotten how to breathe, or opened your mouth in a meeting and prayed your voice wouldn't shake, then you already know today's topic intimately more than you realize. Imposter syndrome. Welcome to the Escalation Podcast. I'm your host, Edita, and today we're looking at the paradox sitting at the heart of some of the most competitive industries. Why the people who perform at the highest levels are often the same people who feel the deepest self-doubt, and why that doubt might not be the enemy we all think it is. One of the most confusing things about imposter syndrome is how convincingly it speaks to you. It whispers. And it sounds rational enough that you start believing it. But your brain isn't trying to sabotage or undermine you. It's always trying to protect you. It's simply using outdated information, a survival system that hasn't evolved nearly as fast as your career has. The human brain was built to keep you alive, not to help you navigate boardrooms and corporate negotiations or performance reviews. It evolved for survival, for recognizing danger, for sensing when you've stepped into unfamiliar terrain. So when you find yourself in a higher stakes environment, a promotion, a leadership role, a room where the conversations move faster than your thoughts, your brain fires the same signal it has always fired in moments of uncertainty. I've never done this before. This may not be safe. So in reality, your brain cannot differentiate between I haven't done this yet and I'm not capable of doing it. Same fear, same cortisol response, completely different realities. And in high performance industries, this confusion gets magnified because the more competent you become, the more complex the problems you're going to face. Your responsibilities outpace your familiarity, and suddenly you're operating at a level your past self was never trained for. And when this happens, your brain defaults to primitive modeling. It urges you to retreat, delay, procrastinate, or overcompensate, creating behaviors that look like professionalism, but are actually survival responses. So you misinterpret the discomfort of growth as evidence of inadequacy. But what you're really feeling is the tension between who you're already become and the identity that hasn't fully caught up yet. It's not a flaw, it's evolution happening in real time. High performance industries don't just attract ambitious people. They engineer the perfect conditions for self-doubt to thrive. Excellence becomes the baseline. I remember in my early Credit Suisse days, and even later on when I was at Man, how everyone around me just appeared and felt a little bit more confident. So you start to compare your internal world to their external performance. You measure your private uncertainty against the curated confidence of people who are just as unsure as you are, but far better at concealing it. These environments rarely show you the behind the scenes, the late night panic, the self-questioning, the frantic Googling, we all did, the quiet dread of not knowing enough. Everyone performs competence, so everyone assumes they're the only one faking it. Corporate culture reinforces this dynamic. Promotions are celebrated, but the learning curves attached to them are rarely acknowledged. Visibility is demanded, yet vulnerability is quietly discouraged. Mistakes are tolerated, in theory, but in practice, everyone is terrified of making one. And because the pace is relentless, markets moving, deals closing, deadlines shifting, You rarely have the luxury of integrating your new level before you're pushed into the next. So of course you feel stretched. Of course your competence feels unstable at times. Add to this the conditioning many of us grew up with. Don't brag, don't stand out, don't make mistakes, don't inconvenience people. These childhood messages follow us into the workplace and amplify every moment we feel exposed. High performance cultures create extraordinary achievements, but they also create the perfect storm for self-questioning. And it's in that storm, right at the intersection of pressure, ambition, and visibility, that the experience we call imposter syndrome begins to take shape. To understand what's really happening when self-doubt surfaces, we need to look at the psychology beneath it. High performers often assume their confidence should rise in proportion to their success. But human psychology doesn't work that way. As your external world expands, your internal world takes time to recalibrate. There's always a delay, a gap between the version of you that others can already see and the version of you your mind is still adjusting to. Psychologists actually call this identity lag. It's the reason why you can produce excellent work on Monday and question your entire career on Tuesday. It's why you can close a deal, deliver a perfect negotiation, and run a meeting flawlessly, and still go home wondering if you genuinely earned the outcome. And in that space between your fast evolving capability and identity that is trying to catch up, doubt finds room to speak. For some, this takes the shape of the perfectionist, the belief that anything less than flawless means failure. For others, it's the expert, the fear of not knowing enough. The natural genius shows up as well at times, expecting mastery to come effortlessly. The soloist, believing needing help equals weakness. The superhuman, my personal favorite, which I have perfected over the years, holding themselves to unrealistic standards across every area of life. These internal rule sets drive how imposter syndrome appears in your life and explain why two people with equal competence can experience entirely different emotional landscapes. In corporate environments, self-doubt tends to present itself as patterns, certain behaviors often described as the 4 Ps: perfectionism, procrastination, paralysis, and people-pleasing. These behaviors look responsible, structured, and dedicated, but they're often carefully constructed layers designed to protect you from being misjudged, misunderstood, or underestimated. In reality, these behaviors often contribute to burnout, anxiety, and the quiet erosion of self-worth because no amount of external achievement ever feels like enough. And the irony is that the people who doubt themselves the most are often the ones doing the most and doing it extraordinarily well. We've been taught to view doubt as a flaw, as something to eliminate, silence, or outgrow. But it's time to reframe it. What if doubt isn't a problem to fix, but a signal to interpret? Doubt tends to show up at the edges of expansion. It appears when you're doing something new, meaningful, or stretching beyond the limits of who you've been. It's the emotional cost of ambition and not the enemy of it. And importantly, research shows that people who experience imposter feelings often outperform their peers because they prepare deeply, self-reflect, and ask better questions and avoid complacency. People who never feel this tension, they're usually not doing anything that challenges who they are. High performers feel doubt precisely because they push themselves into roles, conversations, and decisions that exceed their previous identity. Your brain interprets this as danger, but your career is telling you it's growth. Doubt doesn't mean you don't belong. It means you're evolving into someone who does. When you stop resisting that feeling and start understanding it's part of your professional landscape, everything changes. You stop shrinking, you stop apologizing, you stop thinking the discomfort is a sign you're unqualified, and start recognizing it as the proof that you're moving forward. To translate all of this into something you can use in your next meeting or negotiation or leadership moment, here are tools grounded in psychology and real-world practice. Number 1, separate capability from familiarity. Ask yourself, is this something I can't do or simply something I haven't done yet? Most of the time, the fear sits in unfamiliarity, not inability. Number 2, Keep evidence in sight. Start a private record. I used to call it my fluffy file. Collate all feedback, wins, results, recognition your brain forgets. This evidence will remind it. This is particularly powerful because imposter syndrome impairs your ability to internalize success. So you need external proof to override an old internal narrative. Number 3, borrow confidence from behavior, not emotion. Don't wait for confidence to show up before you act. Act as the version of you who belongs there in the room, and the confidence will catch up. This is not fake it until you make it. This is behavior-led identity expansion, one of the core principles of professional growth, leadership, and cognitive behavioral psychology. So act the part first, and the belief will follow. Number 4, update your identity regularly. You've outgrown who you were last year, even last quarter. Speak, stand, and decide from the version of you who'd earned the room you're in. And finally, number 5, always expect fear where ambition lives. If something matters, fear will always be nearby. That internal anxiety doesn't mean stop. It often means this is worth doing. This is how high performers grow, not by eliminating doubt, but by learning to walk with it. So as you move through your work in the weeks ahead, don't rush to silence the moments when self-doubt appears. Instead, notice them, invite them in. Those flickers of discomfort aren't signs you're falling behind. They're signals that you're growing, you're stretching, stepping into territory your past self was not built for. That feeling is evidence of expansion. And if you look around and realize you haven't felt it in a while, that may be a cue to reevaluate whether you're still challenging yourself in the ways you once promised you would. Until next time.